The room was quiet, except for the steady hum of the machines. Their soft beeps were a strange comfort, a reminder that there was still time. Though not nearly enough, I sat by her bedside, holding her hand. It was warm but frail, the kind of warmth that makes you afraid to let go because you know how quickly it can fade. Her eyes fluttered open, just slightly, and a small smile curved at the corners of her lips. "You're here," she whispered, voice barely louder than the hum of the machines. "I've always been here," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "Even when I wasn't in the room, I was here, and I meant it every late-night drive, every restless morning, every silent prayer when I thought no one was listening. I had been there, because when you truly love someone, presence isn't measured in hours or days. It's in the unbroken thread of care that never wavers. We didn't meet in a grand or cinematic way. No slow-motion glances across a crowded room. No sparks of instant destiny. It was simpler, ordinary, and maybe that's what made it extraordinary. I met her on a rainy afternoon at a bookstore cafe. I had ducked inside to escape a sudden downpour. Shaking off my umbrella like a dog shaking off water, she was seated by the window, reading a book with a title I'd never heard of. A single cup of coffee sat beside her, steam curling toward the ceiling. Our eyes met only because I knocked into the table beside hers, nearly sending a stack of books crashing to the floor. "Sorry," I muttered, fumbling to steady them. She laughed softly, not at me, but with me. "Rainy days make us all a little clumsy, don't they?" It was the way she said it, gently, like she understood not just my awkwardness, but something deeper, something unspoken. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other often, sometimes by chance, sometimes because one of us happened to be in the neighborhood. The first time we shared coffee, we talked about books and music. The second time, about dreams and fears. By the third time, it wasn't about conversation. It was about comfort, about how easy it felt to sit with her. Even in silence, I didn't realize it then, but love had already begun, not with fireworks, but with peace, the kind of peace that says, "You can rest here. You can be yourself." The memory faded as I looked at her again, her face paler now, her breaths shorter. The illness had come quietly, the way rain softens a day without warning, and though doctors did what they could, life has its own rules, its own timeline. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and whispered, "Do you remember the G bookstore?" Her eyes fluttered open again, just enough for a flicker of recognition. A faint smile appeared. "Of course, you almost knocked over the whole shelf. And you forgave me instantly," I said, smiling through tears, "because I already knew." She murmured, but her voice trailed off, leaving the words unfinished. I wanted to ask her what she meant. Already knew what? That she loved me? That she saw something in me that day, a spark I didn't even see in myself. But I didn't ask. Instead, I just held her hand tighter. Because some answers don't need to be spoken. When I think back on our years together, I don't remember them in strict order. They come to me in seasons, the laughter of spring, the golden warmth of summer, the storms of autumn. And now the stillness of winter-spring was when everything began to bloom. Our first official date wasn't anything fancy. We didn't dine at a five-star restaurant or stroll through a glittering city. We walked through a local park after the rain, stepping around puddles and laughing when I slipped and almost dragged her down with me. "You're hopeless," she teased, her laughter echoing between the trees. "Hopelessly into you," I replied without thinking. And the way she looked at me, half amused, half startled, told me I'd said something real. Something that mattered. Summer was adventure, spontaneous road trips with no maps, nights spent on rooftops, watching stars. The time we got caught in a summer storm and ran into a tiny diner, dripping wet and breathless, sharing the cheapest plate of fries because we'd spent most of our cash on gas. She told me her dreams in those quiet moments, the bookstore she wanted to own one day, the stories she wanted to write, the way she wanted her life to be full of meaning. Promise me something, she said once, looking at me with those eyes that saw right through everything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll remember why you love me, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. I promised. I didn't know then how much weight that promise would carry. The first sign was subtle, a tiredness that lingered too long, an ache she couldn't quite explain. She brushed it off at first, and I let her, because denial feels safer than fear. But tests came, and with them, words I never wanted to hear. I remember sitting in the sterile white office, holding her hand so tightly my knuckles turned pale. The doctor's voice sounded distant, like it was coming through water. Aggressive treatment, uncertain outcome, words that taste like metal in your mouth. That night, she cried, not because she was afraid for herself, but because she was afraid of being a burden. I held her face in my hands and said the only thing that mattered. You are not a burden. You are my heart, and I will carry you as long as I have breath. We fought together, every appointment, every infusion, every sleepless night. I was there, not because I had to be, but because there was nowhere else I could imagine being. Love is not running when things get hard. Love is planting your feet and saying, I'm not going anywhere. There were good days, too, days when she felt strong enough to laugh again, when we danced in the kitchen with an 4-pole as our clumsy third partner, days when the sun broke through the gray and we pretended the world was ordinary again. But winter crept in slowly, as it always does. Her body grew weaker, her voice softer, and yet, even then, she never stopped being her. She still found ways to make me laugh, to tease me about my terrible cooking, to hold my hand like it was the only anchor she needed. I looked at her sleeping, her chest rising and falling like a fragile tide. My mind wandered back to that rainy afternoon in the bookstore, to the promise I made on that summer night. I had kept it. I had loved her, not just when it was easy, but when it was impossibly hard. And in that moment, I understood something so clear it almost hurt. Loving someone truly isn't about how long you get to keep them. It's about how deeply you choose to love them while you can. The night before everything changed, I dreamed of the bookstore, the same rainy afternoon where it all began. She was there, sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. Only this time, she looked up at me and said, "Don't be afraid of tomorrow." When I woke, the phone was ringing. The hospital. Her condition had worsened. I dressed quickly, my heart thundering like a storm. The drive felt endless, every red light a cruel delay. By the time I reached her room, she was asleep, or somewhere between sleep and something deeper. Nurses moved quietly around her, adjusting machines, speaking in soft tones that carried the weight of finality. Hours later, her eyes opened again, slowly, weakly, but with clarity. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Tell me again. Tell me why you love me." I could have said 1,000 things. Her kindness, her humor, the way she saw beauty in the world, even when it felt dark. But what came out was simple. "Because you taught me how to live. because you made the ordinary feel extraordinary, because you are my home." She smiled faintly. "Then promise me you'll keep living, even when I'm gone." That was the defining moment, not just loving her while she was here, but promising to carry that love forward when she wasn't. Love wasn't only holding her hand in those final hours. It was choosing to honor her dreams, her joy, her spirit long after the machines went silent when the time came. I didn't let go, I couldn't, but I whispered the only words I had left. "I love you. Thank you for teaching me what that means." And then the room grew still in the weeks that followed. Grief felt like a constant shadow. It was in the empty chair at the breakfast table, the silence of late-night drives, the bookstore where I couldn't bring myself to sit by the window. But even in the midst of that ache, something else began to stir, something she had left behind her journal. I found it in the drawer of her bedside table, wrapped in a faded ribbon. Inside were notes about the stories she wanted to write, sketches of the bookstore she dreamed of. Opening, and on the very last page a letter addressed to me. "Love, to me, has never been about forever. It's about now. It's about giving everything you have. Even when you know time is short if you're reading this, promise me one thing. Don't let my absence stop you from living. Let it remind you how precious every moment is." I realized then that love doesn't end when someone leaves. It becomes something else, a quiet strength, a reason to keep moving forward, a voice in your heart that whispers, "Keep going, keep loving." I went back to the bookstore where we first met. I sat by the window, ordered coffee, and opened a blank notebook. Then I began to write, not just about us, but about everything she had taught me, about how true love is not defined by the length of time, but by the depth of care, about how loving someone means being there, through laughter, through tears, through beginnings and endings. To truly love someone is to see them, not just their smile, but their fears, not just their dreams, but their scars. It is to choose them again and again, even when life grows difficult and when the time comes to say goodbye. It is to carry their light forward, not as a burden, but as a gift. I closed the notebook and watched the rain slide down the window. Just like it had years ago, somewhere, I felt her near, not as a memory of loss, but as a reminder of love. And I understood, finally and fully, to truly love someone is to make them a part of you so deeply that even when they are gone, you keep finding them in the laughter you share, the dreams you chase, and the life you dare to keep living.